Us a little. So hi, Jeremy. I'm Kim Rodriguez. I'm the Director of College and Career Counseling here at Southampton. And welcome to our 2016 Skype series. So I'm really excited to have Clark participating. Just to let you know, are you familiar with Southampton High School at all?
I am not.
Okay. So there's a couple of unique things about Southampton. When people hear the Hamptons or Long Island, I think that there's a connotation that it's a very rich, kind of exclusive area. And in fact, Southampton is a very, very diverse district. So we have almost 40% free and reduced lunch. We have about that same, hovering around that percentage of English language learners, Spanish-speaking families. We are an unusual district. We're very small. Our high school has about 600 students, so we're very small in that respect. And we have a unique program whereby some of our students have taken Spanish since kindergarten. And it's our dual language program, so some of those students have had in elementary school that 50% of their day is in Spanish. In the intermediate school is taught in Spanish. And so in the intermediate and the high school, 25% of their day is taught in Spanish.
Wow.
So we've just been awarded the internet as accreditation as an international Spanish academy by the Spanish consulate for our programs. So our students who participate in those programs will get a special certificate. So I like to tell college representatives about that because it's unusual. It's very unusual to see a high school credit awarded in 6th grade. So these students can earn up to the 3rd level of language, Spanish, before they even enter high school. And then they have access to AP literature. So most students would do Spanish 4 honors, 5 honors, and then AP language, but then these students will be able to take AP literature also. So that's kind of unusual. And so when you see our transcripts, it might help to explain why we're putting those credits on before they've entered 9th grade. The other thing is we have a fully functioning planetarium as well as a wet lab where we have just started to market some of the fish, the wildlife that's been raised there. So, it's unique to the East End, and, I really don't know any other school that has a wet lab, a planetarium, and so we are very, very different and yet small, so we have quite a bit of opportunity for our students, even though we're so small. So, Okay, well, I'm glad you're back. Okay, so that's just so that you have an idea of who we are, and when you see our students and their materials coming across your desk, you'll have an idea, a little bit of a context for them. And I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I think that when I talk to high school students, not on campus, and so this is kind of weird because,
right.
I think it's best to really only focus on 5 core parts of Clark's identity and kind of leave a lot of the detail and all kind of the nitty-gritty to when they actually become interested.
Okay.
So I'll sort of leave a briefer overview, and then if they want more information, we launched our new website today.
Oh,
so
great.
they can explore that along with me, and I will ask them if they find the information that has now been moved to other places, because it's very difficult. So 5 things that are really important about Clark. First of which is this idea that we have called LEAP, which is LEEP, stands for Liberal Education and Effective Practice. It is our overarching educational philosophy, the idea being that a liberal arts school needs to focus on teaching students 2 very important kinds of skills, the first of which are liberal education, so the LE part. These are skills that you need no matter what career you're going into, things like strong written skills, oral communication skills, quantitative analysis, the ability to analyze a problem in historical perspective, being able to analyze something scientifically, etc.
Right.
That all belong to specific academic departments. So, for example, the English department teaches most of our classes on verbal expression. Not every class, but most of them. So that's your liberal education sessions, things that can be taught in a formal classroom. effective practice, the EEP part, are other skills that we think every person needs, but that aren't necessarily teachable in a classroom.
Okay.
These are things like collaboration and resilience, problem solving, imagination, etc. You can't teach a class on imagination, but you need to learn to do it.
Right.
And so what we decided you need to do is you need to put students in direct application situations where they're given a real problem and said, come up with a real solution. There's not an answer in the back of the book. We're expecting you to come up with something.
Right.
So this works its way into our curriculum in a lot of ways. Like, for example, we have in our history class that spent last semester designing a museum exhibit for the Worcester Art Museum, which is a mile or two down the road from us, on cyanotypes, a kind of obscure late 19th century photography technique that has never had a major museum exhibit ever before in history of anything.
Wow.
And these students put together the catalog for this. They did a lot of research. They talked to artists, and they basically put up this entire exhibit. And so it would be nice to teach students about cyanotypes out of a book, but when you can actually say, create something that no one has seen before, that's kind of a different set of cards.
Absolutely.
And so for us, that's not only about being able to say to our students, look, now you have a museum exhibit on your resume, that's neat, but it's all about the way that they put it together, the way that they solved whatever problems that came up, the way that they persuaded people to agree with whatever they thought was the right step to take. It's about teaching those skills and having a professor with them along the way to sort of guide them through it.
Right.
So our basic model is the fundamental liberal arts that we have, going the entire time in the classroom, alongside these kind of problems of practice that help students develop these important skills. And it's not only in classes, but it also comes across in research programs and internships, study abroad opportunities, community engagement and volunteering, all of that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing.
Right.
Trying to think about the best way to do this. I did it slightly differently this time. So the next thing is the fact that we're a liberal arts school. These are things 2 and 3 together, actually.
Okay.
Are they? No, they're not. It's like thing 2 and a half. I've
Okay.
lost count. Whatever. It's on the list. It's going to be fine. So we're a liberal arts institution, but we don't have a core curriculum.
Oh, okay.
So there's no one class that everyone at Clark has taken. This is a model that we respect. It works in certain institutions. A lot of great liberal arts colleges have core curricula. We just don't think that's the right model for our student body. So the idea for us is that we understand that we want to teach those core liberal arts skills, the writing skills, the quantitative analysis skills, that kind of stuff, but that not everyone is interested in introduction to literary analysis or intro to calculus.
Right.
And so we need to find ways for students to learn these new skills in contexts that are slightly more familiar. So you can teach a philosophy major introduction to symbolic logic. It will not only make their philosophy paper stronger and more logically structured, but it'll teach them the quantitative analysis skills that they would have learned but then not ever used again in calculus.
Right.
Similarly, you can teach the music major advanced music theory, which is a very formulaic mathematical system, and not have them endure, again, calculus.
Right.
So it sounds like we're just trying to get people to not take calculus, but it's really about teaching people new and important skills in unfamiliar contexts.
Right, right.
So we have 8 broad categories of courses that every person is required to take one class from. These are broad categories called perspectives. They are verbal expression, so a writing and reading intensive course, formal analysis that I just mentioned, the language perspective, aesthetic perspective, science perspective, historical perspective, values perspective, and global perspective. The mnemonic device for which is very few leprechauns are stealing helpless villagers' gold. If you're trying to remember, it took me a very long time to come up with that. So that's the way our liberal arts curriculum is structured. You take these courses at any point over the course of your 4 years. I encourage students to take them a little bit earlier, not only because sometimes students learn that they're interested in something and then want to take more classes in that field, and if you take a class as a senior, you're just out of time, you're not going to be able to take a class in that, but also because the skills that you learn in these courses then become helpful in your other coursework. So, for example, when I was an undergrad at Clark, I was the editor-in-chief of our student newspaper, and I was taking forensic science my last semester of my senior year, and we were doing an article on something. I don't even remember what it was about, but we weren't really sure what the best way to kind of investigate whatever problem was going on. We weren't sure if the source was over here, or if the source was over there, and what's the best way to get to the bottom of this, basically. And we were kind of going all over the place and jumping to conclusions, and somehow in the back of my mind, there were the lessons from forensic science of don't jump to conclusions, link all the evidence piece by piece, draw up a hypothesis, figure out how you're going to get this done, and then draw your conclusions. All of that came forward, and we actually were able to get it done, as opposed to just guessing and hoping that we were right.
Right.
And so I encourage students to take them earlier because they might find themselves in situations like those. But sometimes you just want to get started with your major right away, and things get pushed to the end. I totally understand that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's the liberal arts side.
Okay.
Clark is a school of juxtapositions in a lot of ways, and so we have two really, really big juxtapositions. The first is that we're a liberal arts research university. So a lot of students who want to go to the school that has, the big name faculty and, all of their, important, researchers are getting written up in the Washington Post and the New York Times and all these things, oftentimes students think that they then need to go to a school that has 25,000 students. And that's not the case for us. We see research as an opportunity for students to learn those really important skills like problem solving and collaboration. And so for us, if you can put a student in a liberal arts curriculum and in a research curriculum, then they're learning in two different ways, and they're getting stronger views of the material as a result of that. So we see the liberal arts and research as complementing each other. So all of our faculty are doing research in their field. About 65% of Clark undergraduates participate in some kind of research. So it's a huge, huge part of what we do, even though we're a small place.
Okay.
So I think that that's really important. The other juxtaposition is that we're a small school, so we're 2,200 undergraduates roughly, and about 1,000 graduate students, many of whom are residual Clark students because we have a 5-year bachelor-master's program where if you maintain a 3.4 GPA from your sophomore through your senior year, then you can earn a master's degree in a 5th year tuition-free. So about a third of Clark undergraduates, go into that program. So a lot of our graduate students have been Clark students. So we're a small place, but we're also in the middle of Worcester, which is the second biggest city in New England after Boston. Has 160,000 people. Someone's coming into my office. Someone left my office. Okay.
Yeah, but we have it on tape.
Yeah, and so we can figure out who that was. We have 160,000 people in the city of Worcester, and so even though, yes, we're a small school, you'll see a lot of people in the same classes, you'll see a lot of people in the cafeteria as in the residence hall. That is true and exists, but there's still 160,000 other people around. And so I think there's a very, very big difference between going to a school our size that's in a city and going to a school our size that's in the middle of a cornfield where there's nobody else to talk to.
Right. A little bit.
Yeah. And so I think that those two things are really important, but also because, small schools give you all those benefits of, the advising structure and all of that great stuff. But Worcester also is, in a lot of ways, the backdrop for LEAP. So if we didn't have the Worcester Art Museum, then those students wouldn't have been able to put on that exhibit.
Right.
And if,
that's true.
If we didn't have local businesses, there would be nowhere to intern. And so without the city around us, all of this would kind of fall apart. We're also a medium-sized city, which a lot of times plays to our advantage because, for example, there's no law school in Worcester. And so the internships with the law firms and the DA and all of these other places are going to undergraduates as opposed to people in law school.
Right.
So an undergraduate student can, get a little bit more opportunity.
Right.
The last thing is less so, honestly, admissions counselor-y, but is more so based on my own experience as a Clark student. So I would take this one, as a bit of more of an opinionated thing, but it's kind of well understood, is that Clark is a small place, and we are much more interested in collaboration than we are in competition. So to be honest, we're not very interested in grades and doing better than other people in the class. We're more interested in getting the work done.
Okay.
So the students who are judging their self-worth on their SAT scores are not the ones who we want.
Right.
We want the students who care very deeply about what they're doing and will work very hard to do it. So kind of in the long run, people tend to do well, but that's because they care about what they're doing and not care so much about other people. Right. In another way, we take our work seriously, but don't take our egos so seriously. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of a very big part of our deal.
That's great, and it's a really good thing for kids to know as they're thinking about, you know, as counselors, we're always encouraging students to find schools that are the right fit for them. So mm-hmm. rather than, you know, the student who is a hard worker, and I think your model makes sense because they're doing the work for intrinsic, you know, it's that intrinsic mm-hmm. value instead of the external, let me make it look good on my resume, or people are looking at my grades, but they're actually doing the work because they care about what they're doing, and they're successful because they care about what they're doing and they're invested in it. So it really does make sense.
Right. Do you want to hear about admissions-y things?
Sure.
Okay. So we have 6, actually no, let me back up. We have early action,
okay.
the decision, both of which are due November 1st, as well as regular decision. Early decision is a very, very small pool for us, so don't think that you're missing like a very big party if you're not applying early decision. Only apply early decision if you're a gajillion% sure you want to go to Clark. That's my like disclaimer there.
Okay.
And in terms of an application, we're looking at 6 specific things. We're looking at academic program and grades most importantly. So is the student taking the most challenging course load available, APs, honors, things like that? Mm-hmm. Equally important, actually in some ways more important than that, is are they taking a full course load senior year?
Okay.
Really don't like it when a student takes, you know, driver's ed and 7 study halls in their senior year.
Right.
We want to be continuing math, foreign language, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And then, of course, grades, obviously.
Right.
We unweight and recalculate GPAs.
Okay.
Do you all weight your...
We recently, over the past few years, we no longer weight.
Okay.
So our grades are straight averages. We don't, you know, the rigor is indicated by the course title. So we don't rate and we don't rank either.
Okay, great. So, right, so we look at the course titles in the academic program, part of the know, view. And then we recalculate GPAs by taking out phys ed, orchestra, driver's ed, et cetera.
Right.
Because we want to make sure that students are doing well in courses similar to the ones that they'll be taking at Clark.
Okay.
So after that kind of, you know, very academic tier, there is a kind of middle section, which is composed of the essay, the recommendations, and the, oh my gosh, co-curricular activities. There we go. So for the essay, for us, it's not about whether you can use the word precociousness in a sentence. It's about how well a student can kind of explain who they are. Basically, like, can they put a sentence together and convey information to another person?
Right, okay.
It's just a writing sample is really all that it is. A lot of, like, fuss gets made over the essay, and so I always try to, you know, play that down a little bit. It's just how well can you make paragraphs?
Right.
So, so there's that. Then there's recommendations, and we require 2 recommendations, one from a guidance counselor and one from an academic teacher. Please, an academic teacher.
Right.
We don't have an upper limit on recommendations, though, so if someone really wants their orchestra teacher or their art teacher, they can send in a recommendation.
Okay.
And that being said, we also encourage recommendations from supervisors, clergy members, anyone who can give an extra view into the student's work ethic or, you know, the way that they interact with other people, kind of a non-academic side of things.
Right,
It's a big part of what we do. We want to know how well a student does in that kind of situation as well. Okay. So I definitely encourage students to reach out to someone in that vein as well for a recommendation. Mm-hmm. Then there's co-curricular activities. So that's relatively standard. Yes. You know, are you involved? Do you do things? An important caveat is that we understand that not everyone can be president of the chess club because they have to work at a real job or they have to babysit their younger sibling because both their parents are at work, and we understand that. And so we want everyone to put everything they do basically on that co-curricular page so that we know, oh, you're not president of the chess club because you're looking after your younger sibling, 15, 20 hours a week, and so you can't be in charge of the chess club. Because everyone's coming from a different place, we want to see how people are using their time in whatever productive fashion that is.
Right, that makes sense.
So then last is SAT and ACT scores. We are SAT, ACT optional. And by optional, I mean you don't need to send in an extra essay or do anything extra if you don't send in an SAT score. You don't get disqualified for merit-based aid if you don't send in an SAT or ACT score. Last year, about 60% of Clark applicants did send in a score and about 40% didn't. So this is another one of those, don't think you're missing a very big party if you're not sending in a score situation.
Right, okay.
The bottom line for us is for students to send in scores if they think that they're a strong reflection of their academic ability.
Okay.
And whether they demonstrate exactly how smart the student thinks that they are. And even if they do send them in, they're probably about 4% of the application. So.
Okay. So do you have guidelines of what the last class looked like, or even though you are test optional?
So not in terms
Ranges?
of a score.
Okay.
Because with so many people not sending things in, the statistics are basically worthless.
Right, okay.
But I can say that our average high school reported GPA last year was a 3.66.
Okay. Okay, great. Do you have Greek life?
No.
Okay. What's life like on the campus on the weekends for students that are, I don't know what percent live there, and what are they doing on the weekends?
So I would say that at Clark there are probably about 30 commuter students.
Okay.
So we're very, very much like a campus. Not really a suitcase school. We have kind of an absurd number of student organizations. We have like 130 student organizations for 2,200 students.
Okay.
and they put on events almost obsessively.
Okay.
And so there is essentially always something going on the weekend. And since everyone is around, even if you don't want to go to an event or something like that, there will be people hanging out in the dorms and in the off-campus apartments and all sorts of stuff like that.
Okay.
So there's really all sorts of things going on. People who leave miss out, to be honest. And so that's kind of important to keep in mind. And it's everything from, sports games to improv shows to art galleries to, big prize bingo, which is weirdly popular, even though I never. People love bingo.
How about study abroad opportunities?
Yeah, we have about 20 countries, 30 programs. That's what it is. Or something to that effect.
Okay.
The important point about our study abroad programming is that it's not so much about where you go, but it's about what you do. So we understand that some students want to go abroad, they want to do community service, or they want to do research, and so we're focusing on what kind of experiences a student is interested in. So for example, when I was a junior, I went abroad myself to England. I went to the University of East Anglia and did a direct enrollment program where I just lived in a British dorm, lived with British students, took my classes in British, etc. And my roommate went to London, and he went to an American school that had an internship with a British nonprofit. So we saw England in two very different ways, kind of based on our own preferences and lifestyles and things like this.
Right.
So it's not so much about like where you go, but it's about what you do when you go there.
Okay. So I want to introduce Mr. Nathan Jane, who just walked in. This is one of our counselors, Jeremy Levine.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I apologize, I was in another meeting that just went way over.
Totally fine. You missed all my jokes, though.
And you missed mine, so we're even.
How about what are your most popular majors?
Psychology, political science, geography, business management, and then there's international development and social change, which is interesting because I don't think by enrollment it is one of our biggest majors, but I would argue that it takes up a lot of our campus's spirit. So there are I know a lot of students who are geography majors and environmental science majors and environmental science majors and sociology majors and all sorts of, different kinds of things that take a lot of interesting classes in IDSC because it overlaps so substantially with what they're doing. So I would argue that even though it doesn't have as many people as, say, biology does, the kind of general attitude of the major pervades a lot of other things that we do. That's another thing to keep in mind.
Right. It does sound like it aligns very much with the philosophy of the university. So.
Yeah.
Class size, I would assume that they're pretty small.
Average is 21,
okay.
10-to-1 ratio.
What's the best kept secret about Clark University?
That's a great question. Well, substantial bias. Okay, well, there are two. The first are these things called pizzeritas. So we have this place on campus called The Bistro that's open until like 2:30 in the morning. And once 9 o'clock rolls around, they switch to their late night menu, the cornerstone of which is the chicken and or veggie pizzerita,
okay.
which is basically like if a pita was shaped like a taco shell and was full of tomato sauce and milk cheese and just yumminess. And they're $1.29 and you can get like 8 of them. Right, those are awesome.
That's good. Wait, is Clark a closed campus? Can we go in if we're in the Worcester area and get, okay.
Clark is very much an open campus.
Okay.
Definitely swing by and grab another pizzerita. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. The other thing I would say is the archives. So Clark has a faculty member named Meredith Newman. Full disclosure, I was an English major. So
okay.
this is who is kind of a specialist in archival research. And so she has done loads and loads and loads of work along with Fordyce Williams, who's our archivist proper, maintaining the Clark University archives. And so we have down there, for example, a first edition, second issue King James Bible. We have loads of books from the first 100 years of printing. And I did a project my junior year where we had this book and no one had any idea. My project was basically figure out what this is. And I found out that it was a printing of the New Testament in a combination Hebrew, German, Yiddish using Hebrew letters, because the person who translated it didn't want to put it in Yiddish proper because it was, a commoner's language not worthy of, this kind of high religious text, but also wanted to put it in Yiddish kind of so that the Jews could understand it and then convert. And so we did this kind of very bad, halfway job of it, and all of the reviews that I was actually able to dig up were yeah, this is the worst. I don't know why someone would this. If you're going to do it the right way. And so I was able to kind of design a project around this very strange book that we just had in our basement.
Oh, that's great.
So we also have, copies of our student newspaper dating back to 1926 in there, and all sorts of other really cool stuff, and it's in the basement of the library. So that's what I did.
Those are great. Interesting.
Along with chicken pizzeritas.
Do you have any particular questions?
Did you speak at all about the consortium and about, I'm always interested as to how many students truly take advantage of that in you accepting students in from the surrounding schools and those students that are going out from Clark to other institutions?
Yeah, the consortium is honestly something that I wish that we used more. It's something that is kind of a do it in your own way sort of situation. For example, when I was a student, I did this thing called what was it called? Worcester Symphonic Project. There we go. I played string bass in Clark's orchestra, which is about 15 people. And so, it's not very exciting to do, Mozart's 40th with 15 people.
Right.
It sounds kind of hollow and bad, basically. And so, what we did is we brought Assumption, Holy Cross, Worcester State together, and we made a super orchestra. And we played downtown at Mechanics Hall, which is a beautiful, beautiful music venue. However, in my 4 years at Clark, I never took a class at Holy Cross or WPI or any of these places. Some students do, if you do choose to take a class at one of those schools, Clark will pay for a cab for you there and back, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
But to be honest, the schools are not quite close enough to facilitate, every day, let's pop over to WPI for a sandwich, kind of interactions. I think, if just to pull a random example, Tulane and Loyola in New Orleans, are adjacent. And I was visiting a friend at Tulane once, and she said, let's go to Loyola because they have better ice cream. And I was like, okay. But that's not really a reality in Worcester, just by virtue of geography. But from time to time, there will be an event or a speaker or something like that at a neighboring institution, and a lot of Clark students will go over. So it's kind of a case-by-case thing, but in general, it's not a huge part of what we do. Clark students more so engage with Worcester proper and people who live in the direct neighborhood than they do with other college students.
Yeah, I had a student who was very close to choosing Clark. She chose another school for just varied reasons, loved it there, and her mom was very impressed with how Worcester and the area around Clark has changed over the last 20 years. So it seems like that's now really an eclectic draw to restaurants, to just some funky, artsy type of, she's an artist herself, so she was very impressed with the sort of art scene there as well. As that sort of helped you encourage more people to look there and maybe break that old stereotype of what Worcester used to be 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
I would argue that the area immediately surrounding Clark is not in Ithaca, is not a Portland, Oregon, is not any of these places, and people who want only to live in your cliched college towns and buy $8 lattes, those are not the people who do well at Clark. And do we live in the more low-income area of Worcester? We absolutely do. But I think that a Clark student is someone who appreciates that and finds beauty in it and wants to, get out, be a real community member and not volunteer at the soup kitchen once.
Right.
And so I honestly don't care that much if people come see Worcester and they say that's not for me.
Right.
Because those aren't the ones that we want in the first place.
It's actually good. It's better for them to actually do that and make that decision ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this parent had the opposite reaction, who thought it was great. So, not that it's not, but I'm saying it's, I guess perhaps the reputation that Worcester had years ago was worse. I'm not too familiar, to be quite honest with you, but
yeah, I mean,
they were
certain
impressed
things
with the
have
school.
happened. I mean, I think there's a very important distinction to make between 20 years ago, Worcester's crime rate was much higher, and all sorts of things like that. And so I think that 3 cheers for lowering the crime rate. Obviously, that's good. But I think that right now we're in a decent situation where we're working with the neighborhood without necessarily trying to completely change it and drive out everybody who lives here.
Yeah,
Right,
good.
right, that's great.
How it should be, yeah. Great.
I think that's, anything else you want to let us know about Clark? I mean, you've done a really great job, Jeremy.
Oh, thank
Are
you.
you the regional representative? Would you be reading applications from our students?
Yes, that's me.
Okay.
So I think that's everything for me.
Okay.
Anything else that y'all have, or?
Any talk about going testing optional?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, you are? Oh,
They
okay.
are.
You are testing
How
optional
much?
now. How long have you been testing optional? Forgive my ignorance.
About 3 years.
3 years now. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And did you just talk a little bit about what you expect students to do if they are not sending their test scores? Was that a conversation that I missed?
Nothing extra.
Nothing extra. Okay.
Yeah.
Readily.
That's optional.
Testing, everything's optional. Encourage, discourage students from submitting something like a research paper, something that might enhance their, in their mind, their profile through the admissions process?
They can. It doesn't really get looked at.
Okay. I appreciate your
Unless
honesty.
I would say if you have like a research methods class or something like that, where if we look at it on the transcript and we say, I don't really know what that is, and then they can show us here was the product of that. We can say, oh, that's what that is.
Okay.
So save for that situation, it doesn't make too significant of an impact. We assume that most people in high school are writing papers.
Okay.
Right, okay.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
No problem. Have a great day.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks.
very much.
You too.
Nice to meet you.